Plenty on the EU to come, but first let's get your reaction to the news that a Nottinghamshire man who started a petition to allow parents to take their children out of school for holidays is to get the issue debated in the Commons. Dave Headley set up the petition after being faced with a fine when he took his wife and 3 children, all under the age of 11, for a short break to the Lincolnshire coast. Well, since then, the petition has gathered more than 170,000 votes. And Dave Headley's told us he'd taken the break because he'd just lost his job as a plumber and his wife was being treated for breast cancer. It was actually paid for by her mother as a treat, and the fine has now been withdrawn. Andrew Lewis, Dave wants to see the old system of being able to take 10 days authorised absences brought back. It was actually scrapped by Michael Gove in 2013. What do you say to that?
I think a certain degree of pragmatism is needed over this. I actually think we need to focus on the real problems with children and their education, which is persistent truancy and underperformance. And sometimes a few days, if the headmaster and headmistress can accept it, I think is not something that should be brought down on a sledgehammer like this, because the real problems we face in the education system is underperformance and persistent truancy.
So are you saying what he did in this case was all right? Because actually it's illegal, isn't it, currently?
Well, it is at the moment, but I mean, there's been a recent court case over this, and I hope that the Department of Education will use that as an opportunity, not simply to bring in reinforced rules, but to look at the issue and try and focus on the real problem. Cecile Wright, you work in academia, and there's always going to be difficult circumstances for certain families, but it is important for children to be at school, and they do get a lot of holidays.
Indeed. I think there's a clear link between education attainment, learning progress and attending school. And the regulations are clear that children are meant to be in school during term time. Clearly it's at the discretion of the head teacher to allow a child to be absent from school under exceptional circumstances.
And were these exceptional circumstances?
Clearly in this situation, taking a family on holiday isn't. Now, there is also the issue of the holiday companies and how they may be seen to be complicit in this by hiking up the price during the school holidays. And perhaps what we need to do, in addition to the petition, is to ask one of the parliamentary select committees to look at the behaviour of the holiday companies and why they do what they do.
Dave would probably go along with that, and his petition will be debated in Parliament in July. Now then, here's a quiz for you. 4 types of food in the East Midlands have EU protected status. So how many can you name? Answers in a moment. But first, the whole subject of food and farming is a major part of the EU debate here. Helen McCulloch's been getting her teeth into the issue.
East Midlands on a plate. Stilton cheese and Melton Mowbray pork pies, 2 of the region's most famous products, are proving popular at the Food and Drink Festival at Nottingham Castle. They are also examples of produce that has protected regional status, enshrined in European law, meaning any Stilton sold across the world has been made here in the East Midlands.
We sell Melton Mowbray pork pies. The fact that we have to be in Melton to make them, of course, protects the quality of the product, and it stops other producers and supermarket producers from making an inferior product and then from people thinking the quality of Melton Mowbray pork pies is not very good. So for us who specialise in Melton Mowbray pork pies, it's quite important to make sure that all the pork pies people are trying are proper handmade Melton Mowbray pork pies.
I think there are a lot of advantages in terms of exporting. So if you have the same rules in Europe as you have here, then it is easy to export. We're just about to export to Japan, and the logistical nightmare is a real challenge.
Bake-Off contestant Jordan Cox is passionate about local food and says the EU is needed to protect it.
People here, Europe's making our bananas too straight, but I believe that the impacts or the rules that are put in by Europe are for the greater good. Any economic impact that comes out isn't going to hit your big shops. It's not. These guys are too big to fail now, and they have budgets that can take fluctuations in the market. The people we've got selling things here, they can't take these fluctuations. Fluctuations mean their jobs close.
Food production faces EU legislation from farm to fork, and though Farmers Union NFU say their members would be best served by remaining in Europe, many in the industry disagree.
The food we eat is, at the moment, subject to EU policy, whether that's protecting a region's delicacies or ensuring hygiene standards are met. But the horse meat scandal 3 years ago raised some serious questions over the effectiveness of EU rules, with some food producers arguing we would be much better at regulation if we were to come out of Europe.
We're very good at looking after things here. We have the Food Standards Agency and different inspection regimes, which have worked very well over the years. But the scandal itself just shows how we have one rule in Europe, but it's perfect for none. And it is really quite difficult to believe that our borders are actually not at Dover, but they're in Estonia, Latvia, Poland, wherever the edges of the European Commission are. And so we have to rely on those countries to actually follow the same rules we do in the same way. You look at the farming industry today and it is on its knees across all sectors. So if all the billions from Europe that go into the industry are not working, then somebody has to say, stop, whoa, it's time we can do things in a better way.
The EU plays a big part in the food industry, but the people in it are split over whether to say yay or nay.
Helen McCulloch sitting on the fence there. So let's get the answers to that quiz. Can you name the 4 protected foods in the East Midlands? Helen might just have given away 2 of them. A lot of people will have got Melton Mowbray pork pies, of course. And how about Stilton cheese? And then there's 2 more for foodies. Stilton's relative, Buxton Blue, and the lesser spotted Rutland Bitter, served in a few select pubs around the area. Now, Cecile, we've got about 70 products in the UK which get this protected status. Over in France, they have more than 200. We should surely be doing far more celebrating and protecting of our products. Why aren't we?
Indeed, I think we should be. And if I can just add into that what you're saying, the subsidies that the farmers get that are there to protect smaller farmers, in 2013, 300 million pounds were actually given to farmers to protect farmers and protect the production of foods. So I really do think that we should continue with the protection, because I think it's important to ensure that the industry survives.
Isn't that a risk if we leave, which is what you advocate?
Having control is never a risk because you're in a position to do things like that for yourself. It's worth bearing in mind.
How do we know that we'll be in control?
Because we'd have control of our own budgets over farming and agriculture, and it will be important, I think, for us to have a really serious national debate about the protection of the countryside, about food production, protecting certain products, that you are much more able to do when you have the power to do it. And considering we contribute considerably more into the EU than we get back, there's some flexibility there for the future and some guarantees for farmers that we should have as part of that national debate.
OK, well, the NFU's official stance is to stay in the EU. But as you heard in our film there, the farmer Michael Seal saying that he says farming's basically on its knees. Farmers could do much better if we left the EU. Is your government, though, going to prop up these farmers when the subsidies dry out and we're no longer in the EU, if that happens?
Well, the subsidies wouldn't dry out because there'd be an important element of our society that we'd need to look after, and we'd be able to do so.
But they'd be coming from our government here in this country and not the EU.
Yes, and not from the money, the vastly considerably more money than that we put into the EU. It gives us the flexibility, and the important point of this, really critical, is it's a decision, this referendum, about whether you want national governments making decisions about these sort of issues, or whether you do have to accept that 28 different governments make law that we're subject to. If that's what you want, then that's what this referendum is about.
Where would the government get the money from to subsidise the farming industry when it's not in a position to even subsidise the industries, other industries such as the steel industry that is suffering at the moment? You know, manufacturing is one of the biggest industries, biggest employers within the UK, yet the funding is not there to subsidise.
It's a good question. Where will all the money come from?
Well, it's interesting that members of the Labour Party are so keen on subsidising different parts of industry across the board, because of course under European Union law that's not allowed, so that option's not available to them or us.
Well, in that case, perhaps one of the things we should do if we vote to stay in is that we extend the subsidy to the industrial industries, so we ensure that we have infrastructural industries such as the steel industry is viable within the UK.
Won't let us do that.
Well, seeing the single market is one of the main reasons that those want to stay in are campaigning for us to stay in, and that would be blanketly not allowed under those regulations. You're outvoted by 27 countries on that idea straight away.
And talking as we are hear about the rules and regulations surrounding food and also protected statuses, we still had the horse meat crisis, didn't we? So with all these rules and regulations, those rules can still be broken if other countries don't follow those rules, Cecile.
Indeed, but the fact is the regulations, the rules are there. It's the process, or the issue is the implementation of those rules and to ensure that they are done appropriately and effectively.
Labour MEP, East Midlands MEP Glenys Wilmot's been fighting really hard on food safety, pushing for country of origin labels and also this traffic light system. Surely it's much more effective to push for all of those regulations when you're inside the EU than sitting outside it.
Well, not if you want the regulations to apply to your own people, because then you make the rules up yourself. But if you are wanting to be part of a political system which is 28 countries making the rules rather than one, then this is why this debate is so important. We're way beyond an idea of a free trade zone like in 1975. The EU means a lot more than that and encompasses a huge amount of regulation every day. And if that's what you want, that lack of control, then staying in is the answer for you, not for me.
OK, well, that's the story for our farmers and food producers. But could the region's black and ethnic minority voters play a major role in the referendum? And which way will they vote? Meetings are being held across the East Midlands for voters from minority communities to help them make up their minds, with events being held in Leicester and Nottingham.
Whether it's black or whatever nationality, you know, you need to be in the system so you can be a part of what's going on.
If they're unsatisfied with so many people coming in, it hits back on us who's here, yeah? Because they start including us then with all the other people who's coming in.
I've not heard enough to convince me either way so far. And a lot of people are being turned off, they might not even vote.
If we're talking about people coming from Jamaica, where my parents are from, I'm wondering how that's going to impact.
Well, we're joined now by Dr. Caitlin Milazzo from the University of Nottingham School of Politics. She's been following the referendum closely. So, Caitlin, how important will ethnic votes be in this referendum?
Well, the latest polls show Remain and Leave head and head, neck and neck. So every group is going to be important in this election. So neither side can afford to leave any stone unturned in their quest to convince voters to come to their side. Well,
we heard, didn't we, in our film there, you know, some of the issues that black and ethnic voters face, particularly here in the East Midlands. Those votes could really be a game changer. How important is it that those politicians reach out to them and pull them in?
Well, it's very important. The issue of the EU is very complicated, and there's a lot of information that's coming at voters as they try to sift through how they feel about different issues and what they believe their vision for the country is in the future. And so it's important for politicians to provide information in a way that voters can find accessible and that they can relate to, and figure out how they see their place in the future of Europe.
Well, Cecile, you were at that meeting in Nottingham that we've just seen in Peter's report. Are there particular areas of concern for black and ethnic minority voters?
Indeed there are. The statistics suggest that black and ethnic minority voters who are saying they're likely to vote, that over 50% are likely to vote to remain in. The issue for them are around employment, the economy, and unemployment. There is concern about the conflation of immigration with the referendum. The fact that there's a degree of toxicity around it, the negative undertone, which I think for some groups is being taken personally, that there is a sense in which there's a conflation of people who have been here, born here, whose parents came in the 50s, consider themselves to be outsiders and because of the tone of the debate, particularly in relation to migration, immigration. So I think that could be off-putting, that could be disconcerting, and I think the parties on both sides need to look very, very carefully on the messages that are being conveyed there.
It's very important to both have a debate about migration and keep it in a respectable and decent fashion, as we've just touched upon. It's also important to remember, I mean, I have colleagues like Saeed Kamal, who's Pakistani origin, who's the chairman of the European Conservative and Reformist Group, right across the ECR for the whole of the European Union Conservatives. He's declared for out because of his concerns about migration as well. So this isn't a one-way street, but it is a subject that needs to be dealt with the appropriate sensitivity.
And I think the thing is that certainly what we're hearing and seeing at these meetings is that people don't want to feel left out or isolated, and there is a danger, isn't there, this saying that a lot of politicians do, excuse me, Andrew, are male, pale and stale.
Yes, and that is often an often used adage, and this is part of the debate. It needs to be inclusive to all. It needs to be inclusive to young people, people who are older, people of different races and groups, and because everyone has a stake in this issue, and it affects all of us with our future, and not only just in Europe, but how we see ourselves in this country. As an immigrant myself,
yes.
I mean, I'm very much affected by this issue as well. So it's important that we all find a way that we can relate to the debate and understand how these issues are likely to affect us.
Okay, well, stay where you are for a moment, because there's another specialised group. The politicians are also trying to reach Labour voters. Like the Conservatives, the party is split over the referendum, officially supporting it, but with some MPs and trade union members backing the Leave campaign. Our political editor, Tony Rowe, has been speaking to Labour voters and leaders.
The audience awaiting John McDonnell at a conference hall in Beaumont Leys were Labour supporters and activists, the ones who are spending 3 nights a week at the moment knocking on doors, trying to persuade people to vote in the referendum.
I believe that we are in the fight of our lives to remain in Europe.
The Shadow Chancellor promised people here that Labour's Remain campaign is not going to be scaremongering. So how does he react to the fear that even Labour voters don't know where the party stands?
The problem is this could be really close if we're not careful. And it is about Labour votes, it is about young people, because the Conservative Party is so split. And what we've got to say, this is about the future of the country, not about the future leadership of the Conservative Party. And that's what the debate seems to have been up until now.
In the 1975 referendum, it was the Labour Party split by divisions. So do people know where Labour stand now on the European Union?
I honestly don't know. I don't know.
I would hope they're for it. I mean, my parents have supported Labour for quite a while, and the things that they stand for, I've pretty much agreed. I've never asked that question, actually.
Stay in. That's their official, I think.
To stay in. It certainly is. Yes. Being as we're both members of the Labour Party, then yes, we do know it.
I mean, if I don't know, obviously not doing a good job.
Because the Tories are split over EU membership, the Remain camp need to get Labour voters to back them to win. And that means getting people to the polling stations. Will they? Have they done enough?
Time will soon tell. Not looking good for the Labour Party on message on this, really. The only people who were sure of where the party stood were party members.
I'm not
the ones we spoke to.
Indeed, I'm not quite sure that I agree with you. I stood in the local election in Derby a month ago, and I'd been out with others campaigning for a whole year, and we were door knocking and talking about the EU referendum.
And what response are you getting?
On the whole, people wanted to hear more. And wanted to hear more about the argument. In terms of Labour, I think Labour has been quite clear about wanting to remain in.
Has it?
And Jeremy reinforced that position on Thursday when he spoke about the benefits of staying in terms of workers' rights, women's rights.
Yes, that was just this Thursday, but some people argue he should have done that all along. He should have been bolder and stronger from the start.
I disagree with that. I mean, as you know, the media doesn't always convey the strong messages, positive, strong messages.
And you can't always blame the media.
I'm not blaming the media, but I'm just saying the media doesn't always convey the strong messages that are coming out from the party. And I would say that, yes, of course, now as we're getting nearer and nearer to the actual day of the voting, more and more needs to be done. And I know that the Labour Party are out across the country door knocking and speaking to voters.
OK, well, Andrew, we know, obviously, what your party thinks on this. It's split. You're defying your leader, obviously, by favouring out. And has this become a story really about the internal divisions within your Conservative Party when, as you said earlier, it's a personal decision that we're making here?
David Cameron...
We're distracted by these divisions.
David Cameron made it clear that Conservative Party members and indeed even his own cabinet members can take their view on it. So I'm not sure the concept of me being defiant is exactly right. What I do think has happened is that the Labour Party at that national level has been a bit slow to put its key positions forward. And that's because the two principal people, John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn, have a huge and long record of opposing the EU in virtually every respect. And now that Jeremy Corbyn has made an intervention, he said if he was Prime Minister he'd veto the transatlantic trade agreement, which is one of the main planks and reasons that David Cameron has put forward for staying in the EU.
Should Labour have been tougher, stronger, bolder, sooner?
Yes.
Right.
They should have. With the Conservative Party divided on this issue, it's very important that that there are clear cues to voters about where the other parties stand, right? In order to keep us in Britain, if that is your goal, voters need strong, clear, short messages about why they should vote to remain. And with the Labour Party divided or being very quiet on the issue, and the Conservative Party divided, this means that voters are receiving a lot of conflicted messages.
Mixed messages, and only a few weeks to go.